Hey everyone, welcome to the Mount Valor podcast. This is episode 5. If you guys have been tuning in, I've been going through a series of men just telling their stories, being able to express what they've learned and on their walk with Christ and kind of what they're doing to get closer to Christ, and just trying to bring you guys hope and trying to bring you guys tool to amplify your lives. Today, I have a good friend, Harry Wilson, who is a pastor at LJCF. Harry is crushing it in life and is happy to have him on. And Harry, take a second to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd describe it as crushing it, but I appreciate you being my hype man, Garrett.
Everyone
Um,
needs one.
and I need one. Yeah, I'm Harry. I've been pastoring at La Jolla Christian Fellowship for I think coming up on 9 years, which has been such a beautiful, difficult, amazing journey to be a pastor for 9 years. I'm 29 years old, so almost turning 30 this year. And then, yeah, I'm a husband, and my wife and I just had our first baby boy. So, husband, father, pastor, and that's me, man.
He's a jack of all trades.
I'm doing it all, truly.
Yeah, well, appreciate you being on, man. And, I kind of just want to start back to kind of just where your faith began, kind of tell the audience of maybe how old you were and just kind of like where you first learned about Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for having me. When I was little, when my parents were still together, they're divorced now, but when they were together, um, very church and talking about Jesus and all those things was definitely a big part of our life up until, I think I was probably around, I don't know, first grade when they got divorced. But I definitely remember as a little kid going to church, hearing about Jesus, talking with my parents. And I remember feeling a really strong connection to God, from like as honestly as far back as I can remember. And I loved the Bible stories. I especially loved the story of Samson.
Mm.
Samson is like, just like this warrior, and turns out he like kind of sucks like later when you read it as an adult, but when you read it as a kid, you get
Yeah.
the children version.
Yeah. He
And
doesn't make the best decisions all the time.
oh, for sure. In the children version, he's like pretty rad, he's just all you see is him ripping open lions and
Yeah.
defeating God's enemies. And I just remember as a little kid, I was like, man, I want to be like a warrior for God like Samson. I just thought Samson was so cool. And so that was a big, I mean, it really was early on, and later, like many do, kind of fell away and had to get back on track. But definitely for as long as I can remember, had a foundation, and that helped me. That helped me know how to get back when I got
Mm.
lost.
I come from a divorced family too. My parents divorced when I was 4, and I didn't really get to know even who Jesus was till maybe like 6th or 7th grade, and that was like at a church camp.
Mm.
Did that divorce around first grade, did that affect your walk?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it affected my walk in a lot of ways. Um, my dad was one of the big proponents of us going to church and really kind of pushing our faith. And so when my parents got divorced, my mom definitely remained a Christian, and we would still go to church at times, but it definitely was less of a priority.
Mm.
So it affected, I think that consistency of being in community, I had less of, and when I had it, it was really because I went and pursued it on my own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Later it got even more challenging when, one, you grow up, my dad lived in Missouri my whole life, and so you grow up without a super present father figure around to look to, like, what's a man of God look like. And then I found out as, I don't know, I probably found out in fifth or sixth, maybe sixth grade, that my dad had multiple affairs.
Mm.
That really then rocked, like, what is a man, if he was the one pushing this thing,
Mm-hmm.
what are you supposed to look like. And my dad and I have, since, patched a lot of that up, and are in a really good place. But it affected me as a young man to know where to look for an example, and then not being consistent in community and seeking out my own community. So I would say there's spiritual ripple effects in several different areas for me. But God is good. He provided a lot of great people in my life who took me under their wing, and that was huge for me.
Yeah, God is good. And even despite like any bad circumstance, there's always good to come out of it, right? Especially like when you start looking, there's even times when you're not looking, but he finds you. And I kind of found that at church camp. When did you feel that God was like more like, okay, Harry, seeking you out rather than you kind of just going through the waves of things? Because I think as a first grader, you don't have your priorities lined up. You're really worried about recess, and you're worried about maybe, what your friends think, and, what your mom packed you for lunch.
Right.
So when did it kind of come to a
Always
conclusion?
just peanut butter, just a peanut butter sandwich, like no jelly, just peanut butter.
That's all you ate was peanut butter?
That was my lunch.
Crunchy or smooth?
Not smooth always.
uh that's funny. And then, so yeah, like what time in high school, middle school did you find God kind of seeking you? Because I actually think, people are like, oh God, why me? Or like, they kind of this doubt thing, and they don't actually realize like God actually kind of seeks you out first before you seek him out.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. That's super true. It goes back to that, like, we only love him because he first loved us verse. I think for me, I would say, I mean, I feel like, yeah, God's always been seeking after me. I kind of slowly, it was like a slow distancing process, and God put spiritual people in my way. And really, a senior year of high school, I was the president of Faith Club at La Jolla High,
Oh
and I
wow.
really didn't care to be president. I had no desire, but I was kind of the only one who'd been there for 4 years, and then
Those
some
also make the best leaders that don't want that
the
position.
ones who don't want to do it. That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. If you want leadership and power, you probably shouldn't be the
Yeah.
guy. And I didn't want it, but I'd been there the longest. Kind of always went to club, and then we had a guy come in from a youth organization, and he was awesome. I still talk to him today, and he kind of took me under his wing and and spoke some life into me. And then throughout high school, on and off, I'd gone to flood church, and that was really helpful to have. Like, I would just get these doses of just like the spirit, in the sense of like going to flood, worshiping, hearing the word, and I'd ride that for a while, and then I'd kind of do my thing. But like, I would say it shifted for me dramatically at about 20 years old, because I had finally pushed it in the rear view so much in my life and was chasing after all my own things.
Mm-hmm.
I My life truly wasn't heading in the direction that I had hoped. And I was dealing with tons of anxiety, felt super trapped. I was pursuing after a bunch of things that just felt like meaningless. I was in a really kind of toxic relationship. I was pursuing MMA, trying to fight MMA as a professional, and I had several
Mm-hmm.
MMA fights. But all my buddies, all my pro MMA fighter buddies, were all like homeless. Like, even if they fought in the UFC, you fight once or twice, and then you get cut, and then you're back to
Yeah.
sleeping on your mom's couch. And
When
so
what did you hope for, what did you hope to turn out to be, right? Because you're pursuing all these things, you kind
yeah,
of find out that, these things aren't really working out, and they're actually inducing bad behaviors or bad emotions you don't want. So like, kind of what did like picture perfect Harry look like that you were aiming for?
yeah, man. I was aiming for UFC, fighting in the UFC, the big lights, getting my hand raised. That's what I was aiming for sure.
Fame and
Professional.
glory.
Oh yeah, dude. Fame and glory. That's what I dreamed of from a little kid. Just
Mm.
getting to use martial arts to make a living and to beat people up in front of other people
Mm.
sounded rad. And so that was what I was shooting for. But I was realizing how few people made it. And then I was going to school as kind of a backup, but I didn't like school anyway, and was in a relationship that I felt kind of stuck in. And it was just, I really wasn't going in a positive way, and I could feel
Mm.
it emotionally, and the people around me could feel it. And so what happened was literally, Adam Statmiller, our head pastor here, he reached out to me pretty much out of the blue because my mom was attending La Jolla Christian Fellowship and I wasn't.
Mm.
Because at the time, for all our listeners who attend now, it was like there were like 60 people here, one service, 60 people, all 60 years old and older. And
And just to vet, my wife and I started going around this same time. So we brought the median average down from like 65 probably to about 50 because we
yeah,
came
you
in
guys,
about 24 and 26. And yes, everyone else in that congregation was 60 plus.
yep, yep, yeah, you guys were the cool kids on campus for sure.
At least the
And
youngest. I don't know about the coolest.
No, you're cool. But so I didn't attend here. I wasn't super interested. But my mom would come here at times and she got talking to Adam and my grandma had worked here. And so I had some connection here, but I wasn't, wasn't super interested in attending. And then Adam Statmiller reached out to me randomly, asked if we could grab coffee, and I was like, sure. I don't even think I'd met him. So I don't know, homie's bold. And then yeah, we got coffee, we're chatting, and eventually one coffee turned into two, and then he was like, yeah, dude, I think God told me you're supposed to be our youth pastor. And I was like, that's insane. Like, what are you talking about? And all I knew though was he offered me this like summer internship to kind of try it out, be the middle school teacher, pastor, whatever.
Hmm.
And like there's like three middle school kids, and it was just come work for the summer, check it out, like eight
There's
hours
about
a
the
week.
same for high school too.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It was super small. And one of them was like Adam's daughter. And so I
No
was yeah,
pressure.
and so I tried it, and all I knew, I didn't know what any of it meant except that it was an open door that God was giving me, and that open door led to me leaving behind so much of the sin. And then ultimately really what it was repenting and putting God first.
Hmm.
And I did a deep dive. I dove hard into scripture, hard into prayer because I knew I felt behind. I was like, gosh, if I'm going to work with kids and tell them about Jesus, like I better get my crap together. So I started like spending at least, I mean, a lot of times like 3 hours a day
Mm.
just in scripture, in prayer, just trying to get myself to a place where I felt like I could be a light to people. And anyway, and it changed the whole trajectory of my life. Now I'm 9 years later, family pastor here, definitely more than three kids in our youth groups, and met my wife and have a baby. So it's been awesome.
Lots happened in a decade.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. So
When
I'm in a weird spot.
when you are like in this like process of like it's got to be kind of a shell shock when someone's like, "Hey, I think God told me that you're going to be our next youth pastor." Like, does that ricochet your life, or are you just like, "Oh yeah, cool. All right, let's go." What was your mind frame in that section?
I think it felt simple to me. I think to some degree, I didn't know what it meant, but I knew nothing else was working.
Mm.
And I forgot to mention also, like a week before that happened, I had finally started kind of praying a desperate prayer, and I didn't pray like that intentionally that often, but I was asking God for a new direction. And then
Mm.
a week later is when I forgot to mention that when he reached out. And so I kind of knew this was the answer to that prayer. And I knew it was going to have some ripple effects, but I was so unhappy with where things were. I was kind of cool with it. I was just like, let it ripple. Like, this is what I'm doing.
Do you feel like you kind of hit your bottom of like, okay, God, I'm done driving. you can take the steering wheel. I know you want to do it for a long time, but I've been like doing my own thing. Is it that kind of conversation with yourself?
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. Yeah, it was definitely I would say, yeah, that was my bottom for sure. And
That's
then you find new bottoms and new different things as in life, but that was a hardship.
Sure. Yeah, but I feel like, I don't know, just I guess speaking from your experience and my experience is in a Christian walk, there's a part in a man's life that happens where it's like you try to do your, and maybe this happens multiple times because you just can't lay your hands off this, the driver's seat. But for the most part, there's like this stance of I'm doing it this way. This is how I want to do it. Stay away from me. I'm going to drive. You can be in the back seat. Like when I need you, I'll send up a prayer and just send me my parachute of what I need. And then
Yeah,
we'll keep going. Right. But then it's just like, like you were talking about anxiety. Like for me, it was depression. For me, it was just feeling like I don't have a place in life. I don't matter. All these
right,
different kind of demonic thoughts that get brought up because of the way that we're feeding our flesh. And going forward, it's like you have this one real epitome moment in your life that is a big transition from this is man's way, and then this is God's way, and I'm ready for God's way. Not to say that you're not going to be like that anymore, but the magnitude of the effect that it has on your life, this is that one moment where trajectory you're never going back to, throwing away the Bible, putting Jesus in the trunk and saying like, I'll need, when I need you, I'll get you.
no, I think you're 100% right. It was that moment. And it was kind of that like Exodus moment, you know what I mean? Like, okay, like the Lord split apart the river,
Yeah.
and I'm walking through it. And then now I'm wandering in the desert, but I'm following Jesus and I don't really
Totally.
know where it's going, but I'm with the Lord. And there were several times throughout the last 9 years where I'm like, I don't know, I kind of want to go back. I don't know. I don't know, God, like I got, to get it doesn't mean the struggles stopped, but
Right.
my life, well, the key thing for me, and it's what I tell people all the time, is like, just don't quit.
Mm,
Like, just don't quit. If I just keep walking, if I just keep going, uh, I just found that life gets better, when I continue to walk with God, and even when you're tempted to throw it all back, there's something about that, like God just kept me going, and I'm so glad because there's never, yeah, it's gotten so much better. But yeah, I would agree. I think that was that Exodus moment for me, and yeah, never went back, even in the midst of temptation, because you know following Jesus has its trials.
right. Right. And, we'll get into this in a little bit, but I just, as you talk like that, there's guys out there that really struggle with like wanting to divorce their wives, and I think, and vice versa, right? It's mutual sometimes, and I think the beautiful thing is if you just keep going and don't quit, it gets better. It always gets better, and there's always going to be ups and downs. In Christianese, it's valleys and mountains. And sometimes you're in the valley and sometimes it's really dark, but then there's also really high highs also. And
Right.
the matter of the fact is if you commit to Jesus, he's never going to quit on you ever,
Yeah.
ever. You
Yes.
will be the one to quit on Jesus before he does. And I just think it's beautiful. Kind of what you were saying is just not quitting and enduring those hard times. So when you get to the good times, they actually taste and feel that much better.
Right. Dude, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think that method of just don't quit, yeah, it relates to marriage, it relates to your faith. If you just persevere in where God's put you, like, you will see things improve. You just have to
Mm,
continue to trust him. But it can feel like such a challenge. But if you do it, it's like that, verse, I think it's in Timothy somewhere, that says, like, God who began a good work in you will surely finish it.
mm,
So it's like, continue forward, because he's gonna finish the work, you
totally.
know, that
Yeah.
that he started. He begun the work, like you mentioned earlier. He's the one who begun the work,
Hmm.
and he finished the work. So I just got to not quit. I just got to one foot in front of the other, um, and follow the track he's got me on.
Totally, 100%. It's the promise, and God he never does. How do you say it? He never does not fulfill the promises. He always fulfills the promises.
Right.
And I think so, like, kind of going forward. So, like, you have this big monumental moment. Your whole life is shifting. You're going God's way now, and you're in the passenger seat. God's driving. What does like the first couple years of pastoring look like, right? Because you're this 20-year-old. You're not married. This is your first pastoring job. You're just like, all I want to do is be a fighter and like hurt people in the ring. Now you're like, all I want to do is save people and bring them to Jesus. What does that look like for the first couple of years?
You tell me, man. You saw me at 21 years old doing it. I don't know. You got to go to camps with me early on. I don't know. What do you think it
Well,
looked like?
I'll give you my opinion. I think, dude, anointed. I think that is the one thing that I saw from you. For a 20-year-old, it just never felt like you were intimidated.
Mm,
And I think what was kind of cool about, you had a older feel to you, but you weren't far off from who you were trying to lead. So
mm,
you didn't feel outdated. So that actually elevated you to a position where you could have a lot of influence. And, just for our listeners, because, they might be a little bit older. I don't know if kids even listen to this, but kids when I was going was really struggling with, parental issues of feeling loved by their parents,
right.
or, a lot of them, I don't know if it was joking or if they just wanted attention or if they really idolized it, but it was, the suicide ideation was a
Mm,
huge thing in our church for kids because, the rich and famous might, for those that you don't know, La Jolla tends to have, a wealthier community, but it doesn't mean they're emotionally wealthy.
right.
And I think there's a lot of things that get missed by parents, when they're striving for all these dollar signs. They tend to neglect. Something has to get neglected. That's the thing. You have to really, as a man, you kind of have to decide what you're going to aim for. And I think there is a balance where you can have both, but you really need to watch out when something starts leaning a certain way. As far as, if you're going so much for money, you really need to check your wife and you really need to check your kids and kind of get a temperature of how they see you. Because if it's not feeling loved, then you're doing something wrong. And I don't know if men get told that enough, because it is not just about making all that money, because whatever you leave in your wake, it's going to come back to you. And
Mm,
there's going to be ramifications for that. And I saw that firsthand under your leadership of these kids and kind of what they struggled with. But as far as like, you doing it, it was awesome to be under your leadership and kind of see, you take the reins, especially from, well, actually, I won't say that. Especially, we'll scratch that. But going back to just kind of you taking over from, going to middle school to high school and seeing the transition, seeing the kids look up to you, the kids respecting you and showing you love. Not every high school pastor, I think, can walk into that and just automatically get that. So, from my perspective, it looked like you had all your eggs in a basket. And I'm sure it wasn't like that for you on the inside, but from the outside, it was awesome being able to do that for the time that I did. And I thought you did a great job.
Thank you, man. That's super kind. That's a very kind endorsement for 21-year-old Harry. I appreciate you. And it was awesome, dude. I mean, I loved getting to serve alongside you, and then how our friendships blossomed to what it is now is so rad. So
Totally.
yeah, I mean, I think you killed that. I'll take all the, and I guess, for me, it really was all eggs in that basket, and it was easy to put them in too, also because like I really felt like it was who I was.
Mm,
Like it really fit who God made me to be, in the sense of like I was always the kid who like my homies talked to. I
mm,
was the dude like, if I had a buddy even, in middle school and high school, and you had to cry on someone's shoulder, or you wanted to like just talk through your big questions. I don't know why, but my friends always came to me. And so I was always down to listen. I always down to ask questions and to share, and it just felt like I think I'm made for this. Like I think God built me for this. And I love people, and so it really felt like I put all my eggs in my in that basket. There were times really later on where I felt like it got more challenging when I took on maybe too much I was going to school full time and doing this and just getting married, and like that was a really hard season. But for the most part, yeah, I think it felt like this is who God made me to be, and Adam really mentored me that for those first like I don't know 3 or 4 years.
Mm,
He really mentored me and kind of helped me walk into like what's it mean to be a pastor, and that was a huge. I needed that because I didn't know,
mm.
and so he having a mentor really helped me too.
Yeah, that's huge. This is kind of a sidebar, but I still remember, so Harry and I used to, well, we did go to the same college at the same time, and he was into jujitsu and I was into CrossFit. And I regret not getting at least trying jujitsu around that same time because I would be a much higher belt now. But one time we were in the I don't know, we were in some like I don't remember where we were. We were in somewhere. It wasn't the library, but it was just some random room, and we were exchanging conversations like how we were doing or whatever. And I was like, "Oh, I hit like a heavy snatch," and then Harry's like, "That's cool. I choked someone out," and I was just like, "Dang, that is so cool." And now, even looking back now, because for those of you who don't know, I do jujitsu now because Harry started a group, and I ended up, taking it on as an athlete because being a dad, it just requires different muscles and different cardiovascular and is a little bit less injury prone to CrossFit. And I just regret not trying it earlier.
Yeah, I hear you, dude. I hear you. But you're in it now, dude, and
Yeah.
and all that built you for this because you are truly an athlete, and that's what's made you pick up jujitsu so quickly. Because you have picked it up really quickly, and part of that is your years of dedication to CrossFit and just being an athlete. And so you're very coachable. You're incredibly athletic and strong. You know how to control your body. So you all that still pay dividends into where you're already at. I think in jujitsu today.
Appreciate that. So like going into like this whole athletic, and I'm gonna get back to because I want to get back to kind of like I want to start talking about how you met your wife because it's a really cool story. And I've been kind of doing this with all the other guys of just like what courting looks like. But before we get there, I want to talk about, being a dad, and like I guess we can just talk about, what was it like when your son was born?
Dude, it was really, I mean, it was really good. It was really heavy. Like it was heavy because I mean, Kalina had a really hard um like childbirthing
Mm,
process. It was really a difficult labor. And I mean, I love her so much and I've never seen her in so much pain
mm-hmm,
because it just was going on. I won't get in on all the details of it, but there was so much pain and so much like just like you're just desperate to make her okay. And then the baby had a high fever and it had a cord wrapped around its neck and all this stuff, man. And so, uh, and by the end of it, you're so tired.
mm-hmm,
It's nighttime, the baby's delivered, and now it's like you got to go to sleep, but it's not over because he's breastfeeding, and you got to get up and help, and you're doing that for every 2 hours, and then the next night he's cluster feeding, so it's like every hour, and it was hard, it was really really hard, um, but I mean, dude, it's like one of those other things. It's like the more I've continued down, he's 7 months old now. I mean, he is like all joy,
yeah,
like Kalina and I are obsessed. It's so much joy. It's so much fun. It's so beautiful. So it has been by far the most difficult and beautiful thing I've ever done in my life.
mm,
And the beauty is starting to way outweigh the hardship. Um, so
right. Yeah, I feel like the 0 to 1 is just like a grind, an emotional grind because you're tired, you're hungry, your rhythm gets thrown off in the house because you're like, oh, when you're married and don't have kids, like you can still go do whatever you want as long as your wife's cool with it, right? And and then it's like this kid comes in and you're like, well, I'm going to go to the gym. And it's like, oh, shoot, I have a kid to take care of. Or, I'm going to go do whatever. And then it's like, I got to feed him or change his diaper. Or you're trying to get somewhere to a friend's house for a get together. And you're like, the kid just craps his pants, and you got to change his whole outfit. And that's like
Yeah.
another 30-minute endeavor. And like, so now that your time frames have all gotten crazy, but then one to two, it starts getting way less and it starts getting even more fun. And then 2 to 3, it's like you're playing catch with your kid. And then I haven't gotten to 3 to 4. Actually, I am in 3 to 4 right now. And then like kids like full blown conversation. And it's wild, but it's such a good investment, especially for those dads that maybe struggle, when they're having their kids from the 0 to 1 stage. Like it kind of comes back to just, well, you can't quit because that'd be totally bad of you. But just keep pushing through that pain and being able to, just think of the possibilities that this kid is going to become. And it's going to be so much more worth it when you're changing those diapers or breastfeeding or whatever.
It gets so much better. And we're only at 7 months, and it's like it's night and day from the 1 month, 2 month period. I mean, it's
Mm,
all so rewarding. And yeah, life looks a little different for sure. But that's okay. We make it work, and we prioritize the things we need to prioritize, and it's
right.
good.
Yeah. And speaking of prioritize, I guess for our listeners, because the things that I hear men struggle the most is like, oh, I don't want to get up. I'm going to be tired, or, oh, I just couldn't get to that today because I worked too late and, I just didn't feel like doing it. When it comes to your priorities, like, I know some of it is your job, but I know if you didn't have this job, you would still be, really striving for Jesus. What does your priorities look like as far as, getting to the gym or reading your Bible, your prayer time, your one-on-one time with God? Like, what does that all look like for you on the day to day?
Yeah, I would it's super simple for me. I mean, it is my wife and my baby. So my family is my priority. Definitely continuing to to walk with Jesus. And that looks, that shifted throughout how I go about doing that throughout my life, but continuing a daily walk with Jesus, and then pursuing jujitsu, and then of course my job. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
it's the top four. It's my job as a pastor, and my wife, and Jesus, and jujitsu, and that's all not in order of priority, but you get it.
Yeah,
So
I get it. No, wife is for those men that don't know, your priority should be wife, kid, job, athletic endeavors.
yeah.
That's kind of how it adds up. And if you're not doing that, you might want to try that and see what your life turns out like in the next 2 weeks. But as when you're going, something specific on your spiritual walk, like what does that look like on the day to day? Like, are you reading for 30 minutes? Are you getting podcasts in? Are you journaling? Like, I know there's a lot of different spiritual practices out there, but what does it specifically look like for you?
Yeah, lately for me it's reading. I'm reading a Tim Keller book. It's trying to get into the Bible every day. It's my wife and I just started, which we've never done, and I think whatever 7 years of marriage is like really do intentional Bible study together. I don't know why we
Mm.
have like, we've done it with groups if we've been in like a married small group,
Mm-hmm.
but we've never decided like we're going through this slowly together. I don't know why. I'm a bad husband, I guess, but we
No,
started doing.
negative. Not a bad husband.
Thank you. That's true. But we started doing it. And it's super rad. So
Mm.
trying to do that with her, and then yeah, and then I, just trying to implement podcasts or sermons. I am an avid, like I love sermons. I eat sermons up. So I'm on YouTube all the time listening to sermons.
Awesome.
And then yeah, reading books, and then audiobooks, and I'm in seminary, and my job's pastoral, so I get a lot of good Jesus stuff in my
Totally.
job. I try
Yeah.
not to let that replace my
You don't want to
personal.
overdose on Jesus if that's possible.
I don't know if it's possible, but I don't want my pastoral stuff to try to, often for pastors and people in the church, it can be really easy to let your ministry replace what you do personally to walk with Jesus.
Right.
And it's so easy to do it, and I've totally done it. And it's like trying to fight to separate, not separate those things, because your ministry should flow from your personal relationship with Jesus, but it can't be your personal relationship with Jesus. So I got to make sure I'm doing that and growing and learning and enjoying relationship with Jesus and following him, and then that'll flow into my ministry, and then that does bless me. I get totally blessed doing ministry, and it's part of my relationship with Jesus. So it's multifaceted, and there are for sure weeks where I do it better than others.
Yeah, and I think, speaking of that, that's a good point just to touch on for everyone listening. I don't think it's about doing it perfect. I think it's just about doing it, right? Because there's going to be times where you feel like you're just sludging through the water. And then there's going to be times where you're just like, I'm on cloud nine. Nothing could go wrong. I mean, everything's just people are getting saved. People are getting in their Bibles. People are getting baptized. And it's just, we're winning. The kingdom is moving forward. And then on the other side, you're like, man, could the devil just do anything else? Like this day is the worst. And
All right.
it's like you get a flat tire, you end up getting a bad email, someone broke into your bank account, like your house is flooding, whatever the problem is, you're just
Yeah.
like sludging. But
Yeah.
I also think the important thing too is like the community that you build around you is the one that's going to be able to support you during those hard times. And just something else to point out too is like I like to use the boxing analogy. It's like, or just even MMA. It's no fighter, whatever sport, goes in there by themselves.
Right.
They had some type of training camp for the last 6 months to a year of all different sorts of kind of people to get them to that one point in time.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, Jesus did it. It's like we're supposed to follow Jesus and be like Jesus ultimately, right? That's like, as a Christian, we're walking with him, and yes, salvation has happened, and now it's about sanctification. It's about growing in likeness with Jesus. And what Jesus do? He had 12 homies
Yeah.
that were his core, that he had dinner with, he ate meals with, he shared life with, he served, and I'm sure got served. And then even within his 12, he had three.
Right.
He had Peter, James,
Mm,
and John. And Peter, James, and John were the only people at the transfiguration moment. They were the only people that watched him bring that little girl back from the dead when he
mhm.
said, boom, and she rises from the dead. And they were the only people in the Garden of Gethsemane when he was sweating drops of blood about to face the cross. So it's like, if you need in life, you need a group, and even within that group, like a community, you need a Peter, James, and John. You need a few people where it's like, dude, I need people I can go to Gethsemane with.
Mm.
I gotta have someone who I can share Gethsemane with, which feels like a low, and also the mountain of transfiguration with. Like, I need that three, as well as a larger group. And that's been a huge shift in my life too, is starting to I didn't grow up with Christian friends. I was the most Christian person I knew. So it didn't help me. And now I have really good like Christian men around me. It's like, okay, I'm gathering my group of people I can stride through this life with.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, even just like in any aspect of your life, just speaking to the men who are listening, if you don't like who you are, go find someone that you want to be like, and then ask them where he kind of lives as far as like where his 12 are and his three. Go
Yeah.
find that, and then because once you're surrounded by people you want to be, more than likely you will become that person.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's great advice. And also, like, exactly, sorry to be the Jesus guy, but exactly what like the disciples did. Jesus said, come and see. And they went and just went to his house, or went to where he was staying.
Totally. And I don't think we talk about that enough as far as like on my side of things, like your pastor, I'm a congregant, and I think like, being a Christian is, defending Jesus when people have a problem with him and trying to also share the gospel to strangers. Like it, quote unquote, like that's kind of what the normal congregant thinks Jesus is, or being a
Mm,
Christian is. And we don't even talk about, what else he did as far as being a man. Like, what does it look like to like help a woman? What does it look like just to help the lost, the poor, the
man,
the the single mother or the widow? And what
right.
does it look like to have another good group of men around you to lift you up during the good and bad times, and like actually progress to something where you could be like, I am a Christian man and I am here to move the kingdom forward, because that's really what we should be striving for.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, man. I think that's so spot on. I think we don't talk enough about in the Western church about how to actually follow Jesus past your initial salvation moment,
Mm,
joining a small group and being in a small group, and then you eventually get to a maturity where you lead a small group.
mm-hmm.
That kind of tends to be the end of the vision for you as a Christian sometimes. And then like there's so much more to that than like, oh, I lead a small group Wednesday nights and that's the end of, like that's the plan. And it's like, no, like how do we, exactly what you're saying, and we don't talk about it enough, how do we become transformed by the way of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, who he was, not because we're striving for any sort of earn it salvation that's already been achieved for us, but because we want to, as like that old Jewish saying, it's like we want to be covered in the dust of our rabbi because
Mm.
we're following behind him and he's walking in front of us and we're just getting covered in his dust. Like that's the goal. And we talk a lot about a lot of really good things, but maybe not enough about that.
Yeah, and oh, I just had a really good thought that I wanted to go into, but I think I forget now. Anyway, if I remember, we'll come back to it. But one thing speaking of just like, the full encompass of man, part of being a man is courting a woman. And I want to hear how you met your wife, because I think this is key. Even in today, I know we have social media. I know we can swipe right, swipe left. I think that's a load of crap. I don't agree with it. I think it should still be intentional. I don't think it should be just like a self-service type thing. I think it should be mutual. And I think guys should go out of their way to approach a woman if they feel like that is what they've been called to do. So you have a perfect story. Let's hear it.
Okay. I love that. That's a good intro. I would say, yeah, I mean, I originally met Kalina. I was probably a senior in high school. Um, I was randomly brought to by a buddy to go to this restaurant where she happened to be playing. She's a musician. She was playing music, and I was like, I mean, just like the cartoon with the heart popping out of their eyes, like that was
Yeah.
me. And so I was like, oh my gosh, she's so cool. And so I wrote a little note and she played piano. I wrote this note on a napkin trying to get her to go to coffee with me. I left her the note. And she did not get back to me. And it was about she lived about an hour away and I knew that. And so I
Are you
was
for sure she got that note?
so no, she did not get it, actually. It turns out she never got the note. And so even though it's really funny, she had written a song called The Note, and it was about a boy like leaving a girl a note and the girl getting all excited. And I remember hearing this song and I was like, she did get it. But no, she never got the note. And so that's why literally, so what happened is I followed their band on social media and they had followed me back and that was it. And that was then 3 years go by and I went back to dating an ex and whatever. And it was just kind of a lost cause. And then after 3 years, uh, They were kind of posting. I started commenting on posts, trying to be funny. They started commenting back. I was like, okay. Because I kind of knew they did this one like caption contest thing where if you leave a caption to the photo, and I was
Mm,
like, I will work harder for this than any other male on the internet. I know
I'm
it.
talking about.
Yeah, so I started like deep diving, listening to all their music so I could like find the right lyric to put as the right caption. And I did.
How many hours do you think you put into that?
I don't know. I mean, at least I remember doing it at Mesa College, probably not paying attention in class. So a couple hours, and found it. And then they started talking to me. And again, it was her and her sister. So I wasn't actually sure who I was talking to. I was hoping it was Kalina, but I wasn't positive. And and then they had a show coming up, and I was like, I'm just gonna go to that show. And so I drove about an hour and a half, showed up to the show, and
By yourself.
by myself. Yeah. And Kalina got off stage during like a break in their set and just beelined and came right to me. And we sat and we talked for like 20 minutes while they were on break, hit it off. She went back and played another set. And then, I mean, we started going on dates that week.
That's what's up. And so like after all that, right? Like God, that has to be so intimidating, scary, nerve-wracking, anxiety-driven, but you still after all of those feelings came to and was like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I need to do. It's almost like a need to do it. Almost like I need to eat or I need to drink some water. You need to meet this girl.
Yeah. Oh, I was all about it. I was all about it. I was super. I mean, she was one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, I just
Mm.
think she's so gorgeous.
Hmm.
And she was so talented musically, and her presence as a human, just like being around her, I knew she was a Christian also. And so she had all of that going for her. I was like, she's a Christian, she's gorgeous, she's got this voice, and she seems like just a really great presence that I like to be around. And so I was all in, and yeah, it was definitely intimidating because getting to know her meant immediately getting to know her family, because at the time she was doing music with her family. It was her sister and her mom and her dad, and so like you couldn't like just get to know the girl and like later meet your parents. It was like
You skipped that. You courted the whole family at the same time.
right away, and yeah, so it was challenging, but it was yeah, super rad.
See, that's what you do for all those swipers out there. Skip the swiping, court the family, then you can at least skip one step and it will go a little faster for you.
Yeah, that's true. It did go fast. We only dated a year and a half. And
Yeah,
then
that's pretty good. I mean, I think I had to date my wife for 2 years just because I went on deployment, but her threat was if I don't have a ring on before you leave, I don't know if I'll be here when you get back.
that's
So
all.
so I put a ring. That's a my wife is in sales and she's always closing. Just
That's a
so
power move by Deb right there. Let's
yeah,
go.
yeah. So I had to put a ring on it. But yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that. I love that story because men need to be bolder. And I think men need to have more courage and not sit in this space of, I need to get all the facts. I need to make sure that she hits all the right things before I swipe. It
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a culture shift of men getting out and saying hi and having that presence, right? Because if you're gonna kind of be this like, self-indulging human, I don't know what that's gonna work out for you in the long run if you do meet someone and you do end up getting married, right? Because it requires a ton of sacrifice. It requires being really selfless and meeting your partner halfway majority of the time. And there is a give and get in marriage, but a lot of it is just coming to a 50-50 conclusion.
Yeah.
And I just want men to be able to do kind of what you and I could do.
Yeah.
And I don't, the easy button is there, but I think, a lot of the times being a man and having masculinity is kind of doing the hard thing rather than the easy thing.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I love that you shared that story and appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, man. When I think it's also like it's just there's just it's a shift besides just being more like you and I, which if everyone could be more like you and I, we'd be getting along way better, I
Well,
think.
not just you and I, but just more like
I'm
just
just
more brave, more courageous, and like I
more
think even
handsome or wearing spectacles. Look at these things. We
better
look good.
hair,
Yeah, there
just
you
the world
go.
would be
And
better
no,
off.
I think it's also just a shift in like the mindset. We're told from such a young age, especially girls, but men too, that there's like the one. There's this
Mm,
person, and they're your soulmate. There is your one person. There's the one. And one of the best pieces of advice I got when I think we were newly engaged from a dude named Dave, older gentleman who's a congregant here. Dave and Dora are so awesome. And Dave was like, once you get married, you don't have a marriage. Like you're just building your marriage. And I felt the same way about like the idea of a soulmate. Like I don't think I have one soulmate out there. I think
mhm,
you build your soulmate, you guys become because the two become one. And over time, there becomes not a better fit for you than the person you've been contending with and striving with and raising kids with and loving for 10 years.
yeah.
That's who God's made you to be. If you keep Christ at the center, you guys will become soulmates. And I think that's what's so hard too for people who like for men who, you know, for whatever reason get bored in their marriage or have a hard time or there's fights in their marriage and they want to leave their marriage. It's like you don't what's better, there's not a better for you out
Right.
there because
Right.
you have been building your soulmate. You've been building that person that is on your page, on your team. And it's like, even if you don't feel that way right now, like that's part of this process. So if you dip out and you start over, with none of us are getting younger, so with a pool of people who are who are also still looking. So anyway, I think we just need a shift in our frame of mind of like I remember, and I'll stop talking after this, but was talking to a Christian person here going on a snowboard trip, and at the time he's married now, but at the time he was like, she's got to check all these boxes like non-negotiables, and there was like some of the silliest non-negotiables. I'm like, dude, you're gonna like you're just gonna have to see you're gonna have to be a little more flexible, and like ultimately it's not about checking every box. There are some very important boxes, obviously, um but it's more about who you guys become together than
Hmm.
the boxes they check apart from you, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And that's kind of how I thought before I found Deborah. It was, I was, dating in like struggling with some addictions, and one of these older people that were in my youth or like my young adults group was just like, you just need to pick somebody and
Yes.
just go for it. There is no perfect person out there. There'll never be a perfect person. And time again, I'm reminded why Deborah is the best for me. And I don't think she was like that. There was key components of Deborah that have always stayed true. And that woman can endure a lot. And lucky for me, she like has endured a lot. But in the beginning, it was just like she's Christian. I'm super attracted to her. She has a good job. That was pretty much it. And I was like,
Yeah.
dude, if I don't rope this girl up, I'm gonna miss a huge opportunity for myself.
Yep.
And and looking back now, I'm just like, wow, thank you, God, for making Deborah, so determined, so loving, so endearing, so forgiving,
Mm.
and also so willing. I've never met someone so willing to meet me halfway or do something better because I like it that way, and
Mm.
vice versa. I don't know what she would say specifically, but you really find out how you guys complement each other and what you love about each other over time. And then like there's this really painful thing called sanctification,
Mm.
and your marriage is the best mirror to point out your garbage and what to work on. And it can get very painful sometimes. But I think the key thing, right, circling back from where we first started, was just to never quit, because the benefit of not quitting is you are investing deeply into something that's so astronomically uh big, to the point where the ROI, the return on investment, is beyond what you can think. And I
Mm,
think that's the whole point of God and marriage is, this is the fastest way I know how to complete you before you come to heaven.
mm,
And this is a key component, and this is why the devil hates it so much, is because it is such a good reflection of what the Trinity is, that is why divorce rates are so high and why people start believing these crazy lies. But if we could really stand together, right? I don't think marriage should be done alone, right? I think you should have your marriage and, have your couple, but like, having a therapist, having a few, have that core 3 that we talked about, or that core 12 of married couples walking through life, being able to express freely what's going on in their marriage and have people praying over them. And you're kind of like going through this season or this life together, and you're able to endure a lot more than just if you were on your own. And I just encourage all of our listeners to being able just to be vulnerable, to be honest with people that you trust, with married couples that you trust, and we would lift each other up to be able to endure whatever it is you're going through. And something like a divorce, if you're thinking about a divorce, that is just not the answer, because kind of what you said earlier, there is no better. Who you are with is what God designed to be, because God doesn't make mistakes. And I think you just need to sit with that after this, after you listen to this, and just ask myself, you know, is that true? And the answer is yes. And you just need to not quit and just keep walking through it and being honest with yourself and the people around you.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, and there's nothing more that you have that's like, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, there's nothing more that's yours. Like, if you have a wife and kids, there's nothing more yours than that. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a degree, obviously, that they're not yours. Like, you don't own them, but like, there's a belonging to each other, and there's nothing else in this world. Like, if I break both my legs and I can't do jujitsu, if I lose my job, if whatever, like, there's like, these people are my part of my being. There's nothing more yours. Like, don't throw away what God has made yours. It's like my son. That's my son. That's my boy. You know what I mean? And I
Totally.
reckon if for some reason I'm like, I'm out clean, that doesn't do. It's like, that's my pod. And it's like, take ownership of that. In a way, or maybe even better phrase of saying take ownership, I would say, is like, find belonging in, like, and not saying find your self-worth or identity, but know that is part of your belonging,
Mm,
and so to toss it away because you're dissatisfied right now, um not the move. So
totally. I appreciate that. I appreciate you just giving us your wisdom and everything that you've done in your life. It's been amazing to hear your story. Is there anything, just last couple words, that you would like to just speak to our listeners?
start jujitsu, don't be like Garrett and regret. Dad jujitsu, baby. If you're a dad out there, man, Thursday night, it's jujitsu night.
Uh,
No, man.
LJCF, it's on our website.
That's it, man. No, man, I'm honored. Thanks for having me, Garrett. You've done so cool that you're doing this during this Lent season. I loved listening to you and Nick, and super inspired when I got to listen to that episode. We had some really great men at our church. You're one of them. So thanks for doing this, my friend.
Yep, appreciate it. Thank you, Harry, for being on the podcast, and we'll talk to all of our listeners soon. See ya.